Today we want to speak about Roman 11, which is often misunderstood by many, and we need to dig into the view of Shaul, known as Paul, to understand what Shaul is writing, to whom he's writing, and to dig into it in order to understand. So, of course, for all those who come from Christianity, there is a difficulty because the context is ignored. But we're going to see here that we have the possibility to understand. And we need to apply the rules of interpretation. First of all, we have to know that what is called New Testament is a Jewish book written by Jew for Jewish people first. I repeat, a Jewish book for Jewish people first, then for the Gentiles, and I will explain the word Gentiles. So, this is nothing new under heaven. This is what the Kohelet, the Ecclesiastes, tell us. To understand here, we have first to understand that this so-called New Testament is nothing new at all. It is a renewed covenant, according to Jeremiah 31:31. It is just the beginning. Don't be misled by people telling you that it is finished. It is not finished at all. It is just the beginning. And he will have his conclusion when the Mashiach, who is known as Yeshua, will come back to establish the kingdom of Elohim on earth. But now, we're going to go back to Romans 11, where Shaul speaks about branches which has been broken, and you, what is you? We need to understand, and for that, we need to know the context. The context is only for whatever you read in the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant, the so-called New Testament. We need to go to the Torah in order to understand. The Torah is a 5 books Moshe, 5 books, okay, known in English as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Number, and Deuteronomy. So we need to go back. If you read the prophet Yeshayahu, he said that Yahweh speaking through the mouth of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, say, I am Jehovah, there is no other. I speak the end from the beginning. Beginning in English is Genesis, but in Hebrew, beginning is a word. It's called Bereshit. Bereshit is the first book of Moshe, called in English Genesis, Bereshit. So in other words, if we want to understand, we have to dig into Bereshit, the first book of Moshe, in order to understand the end. Now, I give this context because it's very important to understand. We have to choose. We have to choose. Do I make my own story, or do I try to understand what the scripture says? If I want to understand what the scripture says, I will have to go the same way as it was intended when it was written. If I don't do that, I will do a story. So now, Romans 11:1. I say then, as Elohim rejects his people, let it not be, for I also am of Israel, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. You see, It is about the people of Elohim first. Elohim has not rejected his people. So don't make a story that the Jew has been rejected and that the church replaced Israel. Now the true Israel is the church. That is nonsense. Nonsense. And I will show you why it is nonsense. Because here first he says Elohim has not rejected his people, whom he knew beforehand. Or do you not know what the scripture says of Eliyahu, how he pleads with Elohim against Israel, saying, Jehovah, they have killed your prophet and overthrown your slaughter places, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. He's quoting from 1 Kings 19:10 to 14. But what the answer of Elohim says to him, to Eliyahu, I have left for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So therefore, also at this present time, a remnant according to the choice of favor has come to be. There is still a remnant. Remnant from what? From Israel. Not from the church, from Israel. There is a remnant. That is the time when Shaul is writing in the 1st century. So therefore also, at this present time, a remnant according to the choice of favor has come to be. There is still a remnant. And today, almost 2,000 years later, there is still a remnant. This is a promise from the prophet. You can read in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Yeshayahu, Isaiah, and other prophets like Amos, Hosea, and so on and so on. You will see that there is a promise which include some step. So, but this is, we will go in it, we do in it in another video. We see, and if by favor it is no longer of work, otherwise favor is no longer favor. And if it is of work, it is no longer favor, otherwise the work is no longer work. What then? Israel has not obtained what he seeks, but the chooser did obtain it, and the rest were hardened. As it has been written, Jehovah has given them a spirit of deep sleep, eyes not to see and ears not to hear, unto this day. Quoting Devarim 29:4 and Yeshayahu 29:10. David also say, let the table become for a snare, for a trap, and for a stumbling block, and recompense to them. Let their eyes be darkened not to see, and bow down their back always. Now, we come to the point. I say then, are they stumbled that they should fall? Question mark. Let it not be, but by their fall, deliverance has come to the Gentiles, to provoke them to jealousy. Remember, is that new in the mind of Shaul? No, not at all. He's quoting from Devarim 32:1. We say, they made me jealous by what is not heirs. They provoke me with their worthless matters, but I make them jealous by those who are no people. I provoke them with a foolish nation. By those who are no people. You should remember that it is Devarim, Deuteronomy 32:21. You should take a time what is written. He say to by those who are not a people. Does he say that he is a Christian or this is another group? No, not at all. Not at all. To understand that, we need to go to the prophet Hosea. Because Hosea said clearly, and I will go there to show you before I come back to Romans 11. You see, in the chapter 1, Hosea is speaking about the house of Israel, and he said, speaking about the wife, the harlot, which Hosea took. And she conceived again and bore a daughter, And he said to him, call her name Lo Ruhama, for no longer do I have compassion on the house of Israel, so as to forgive them at all. But I shall have compassion on the house of Yehuda, and save them by Jehovah, the Elohim, and not save them by bow, by sword, or battle, by horse or horseman. And she went Lo Ruhama, and conceived and bore a son. And he said, call his name Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not for you. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which is not measured nor counted, and it shall be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, they shall be called, you are the sons of the living Elohim. And the chin of Yehuda and the chin of Israel too shall be gathered together, and appoint for themselves one head, and shall come up out of the earth, for great is the day of Israel. Listen, if you want to understand this message, you will have to go to Ezekiel 37, where we have the valley of the dry bones, which is pointing to the resurrection, and the two sticks, which is the house of Yehuda and the house of Israel. Okay. Now we go back to Romans, just to make the context. Here we say that the people who are not my people is not people who come from the world, pagans, nations, everywhere. No, these are people who have been assimilated to the nations all around the world, but they are coming from the house of Israel, as it is written here. And Paul knew that. He understood the message and give it yet back. I go back to Romans 11, like where we were. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall, let it not be. But by their fall, deliverance has come to the Gentiles to put them to jealousy. Now the problem with the word Gentiles here, you can take it for naught, because it's very important to understand. If you go into the Hebrew, you will see Gentiles is a name which is plural, which comes from the Hebrew word goim, plural from goy. Goy is nation singular, goim is nations plural. Okay, now he say deliverance has come to the goim. Okay, it's the nations, to put them to jealousy, but not every nations. And if their fall is richer for the world, and their failure richer for the nations, how much more their completeness? For I speak to you, goim, nations, inasmuch as I am emissary to the nations. Shaul indeed was an emissary, a sent one, a shaliach, to the goim, to the nations. Because now his work is that through his message, those who belong to Israel, we come back, we return to the Torah, to the word of truth. And I will prove you that these nations are not any nations, but specific nations. I will show you that. Just wait a moment. If somehow I might provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, Yehuda, and save some of them. For if they're casting away the house of Israel, remember we read in Hosea, is the restoration to favor of the world. What is their acceptance but life from the dead? Now, if the first fruit is set apart, the lump is also. If the root is set apart, so are the branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, what are these branches? What is branches? Christianity has many times said that it's Judah. It's not true. Judah has never been broken off. Judah has been kept in the covenant throughout. Those who have been broken off are the house of Israel. So, and if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, a term that you should put on the paper, wild olive tree, and we will explain that, have been grafted. You take one tree, you make a cut in the other tree, the branches, and you put them together, and you will graft them, so that it will become one. This is very important to understand. And came to share the root. Because he has been grafted in, he shares the roots. and came to share the root and fatness of the olive tree. No more a wild olive tree, but the olive tree. The olive tree is Israel. Do not boast against the branches, and if you boast, remember, you do not bear the root, but the root bears you. You should say then, the branch were broken off that I might be grafted in. Good. By unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by belief. Do not be arrogant, but fear. For if Elohim did not spare the natural branches, remember, wild olive tree, the wild olive tree taken, grafted into the olive tree, become one with the olive tree. But they are the natural branches here. Now this one, that is the wild one, he has to be grafted in order to become one with the olive tree. He said, do not be arrogant. For if Elohim did not spare the natural branches, he might not spare you either. See then the kindness and sharpness of Elohim on those who fell sharpness, but toward you kindness, you, the nations. If you continue in his kindness, otherwise you also shall be cut off. And also, if they do not continue in unbelief, shall be grafted in, for Elohim is able to graft them in again. Graft them in again. Okay? Now, I want you to understand. It keep going, 11:25. For I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers, lest you shall be wise in your own estimation, that hardening in part has come over Israel, until the fullness of the nation has come in. Wow. Here he say the fullness of the nations has come in. Other translation we read, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. We need to know who are these Gentiles, who are these nations, who are these people. We need to understand. In the beginning of this video, I have to tell you that to decipher, to understand, we need always to go back to the Torah. To go back to the Torah, but the Torah is the word of truth. If you want to know the truth, you have to go to the Torah. Nowhere else. Nowhere else. Not in other books, just to the Torah. The Torah has everything you need to understand. And here we will see that the promises have been made long ago to Israel, and told all those who belong to Israel. So in order to understand what Shaul is saying here, until the fullness of the nations, of the Gentile has come in, we need to go to the book of Bereshit, Genesis. I have told you, the beginning. We go back to the beginning in order to understand the end. This is how it works. So we go back to the chapter 48. We go to Bereshit, Genesis chapter 48. And we go in this beautiful story when Yaakov is about to die. And he's in Egypt now. He's in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is Egypt. And he met Joseph, of whom he was separate 20 years. And Joseph has grown up, of course, he's married, he has children. And Jacob wants to know the children, who are Manasseh and Ephraim. So he tell Joseph, bring me the children here, I want to see them. So Joseph bring Manasseh and Ephraim before Jacob, and you have to know, Jacob is sitting, and the children in front of him. So the tradition is that the firstborn receive the blessing first, with the best blessing first, and then the second one. So Joseph, knowing the tradition, put Manasseh, the firstborn, before the right hand of Jacob. You know, it's in front of him. He's put it in front of the right hand, and he put Ephraim before the left hand, here on this side. They are facing Yaakov. Now, Yaakov, who knows what he gonna do, he put his right hand on Ephraim, his left hand on Manasseh. He crossed. Now, Joseph see that. He said, oh, my father, you are doing wrong. You are doing wrong, because this one you put the right hand is not the firstborn, so it cannot receive the blessing. But listen what is going on. It's very interesting. So I go back to the place. So Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, of course, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel, Jacob, stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, consciously directing his hand, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, the Elohim before whom my father Abraham and Yitzchak walked, the Elohim who has fed me all my life long to this day, the messenger who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the youth, both, and let my name be called upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and let them increase to a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it was evil in his eyes, and he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from the head of Ephraim to the head of Manasseh. And Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also become a people, a goy, and he also is great. Yet his younger brother, Ephraim, is greater than he, and his seed is to become the fullness of the nation, the Melo Hagoim, the fullness of the nation. Here you have the key to understand Romans 11. It is here that Shaul understood that this Ephraim has become a fullness, a multitude of nations throughout the centuries, has multiplied all around the world, and has been mixed among the pagan nations. Mingle. You need to understand. Now I go back to Romans 11. And it's very important to understand that we need to see that in its real context. So Romans 11, when Shaul tells us that it is really a mystery. You see, it is a mystery. You see? I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers, lest you shall be wise in your own estimation, that hardening in part has come over Israel, until the fullness of the nations, of the Goyim, of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel shall be saved. As it has been written, the deliverer shall come out of Zion, he shall turn away wickedness from Jacob. Why? Why does Romans say, and so all Israel shall be saved? Because you have to know, if you read carefully the book of Bereshit, Genesis, in a chapter where it's about Joseph. Joseph was sold into Mitzrayim, Egypt, at the age of 19, and he stayed there for 20 years. So when Yaakov come back to him with his son, he come in a pagan land. Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph who have been born in a pagan country. Pagan country, Mitzrayim, Egypt. They have been raised up in a mixed culture between the culture of their father, Joseph, and the culture where they are living, in Mitzrayim. This is a shadow of things to come. Now, Yaakov goes there and want to bring them back to the covenant which Jehovah made with Abraham and Yitzchak. He wants to bring them back. He wants to be part of the covenant. This is why he put his hand on them to bless them. He said, okay? He says, speaking in the name of the Elohim of Abraham and Yitzchak. So he bring them back to the covenant. And all this now, Shaul was a man who was very well educated in the Torah. It is said that he knew the Torah by heart, from the first verse of Bereshit, Genesis, to the last word of Devarim, Deuteronomy. He knew it by heart. And he went, when he got the revelation of Yeshua, the one is called in Christianity Jesus Christ, he received the understanding about the shifting now. This is that not only Yehuda, but the house of Israel and this nation are called into Israel. You see, say, and so shall Israel, all Israel be saved. Israel is a compound of Yehuda, the house of Israel, and the Melo HaGoim, which is Ephraim. How do we know that, you will say? And the question is, okay, how do we know that? For that, we have to go to the book of Yehezkel. Yehezkel make it clear, beyond the doubt. So we can look in the chapter 37, and we have heard the valley of the dry bones, which is about the resurrection of the whole house of Israel. Right? We have to be very careful with this, you see. So, now, in Yehezkel 37, if we look from the verse 15, we read, "And the word of Jehovah came to me, saying, And you son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Yehuda and for the chin of Israel his companion. Then take another stick, another one, and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim was the son of Joseph, and for all the house of Israel his companion." You see, we see that from both sides. Yehuda, the company of Yehuda, is the house of Israel, and Ephraim is the whole house of Israel. Why did he say all house? And here in the first he say, in Yehuda he say, for the children of Israel. But here he say, for all the house of Israel. Why? Because Yehuda is also part of it. You understand? This is a promise of the reunification of all Israel. Nothing else. Okay, you will say, but if I am not from Israel, what I'm doing is no problem. We don't need to be a descendant from Israel in order to be accepted. Here we have Shaul again, who explained that if we are from outside, according to the Torah, then, and we accept the Torah which has been given to Israel at Mount Sinai when they came out from Egypt, then we become part of the house of Israel. Read Ephesians chapter 2. Read Ephesians chapter 2, it is written. We become part of Israel, the household of Elohim. Household of Elohim. Who is the household of Elohim? That is the question. For that, we need to have the answer. We go to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, and we go to the verse 30. I will go a bit, okay. When the Malach, the messenger, came to Miriam, not Maria, but to Miriam, the wife of Yaakov, when she will give birth to her son, Yeshua, known in Christianity as Jesus Christ, he told him following: "Do not be afraid, Miriam, for you have found favor with Elohim, and see, you shall conceive in your womb and shall give birth to a son and call his name Yehoshua. He shall be great, he shall be called the Son of the Most High, and Jehovah Elohim shall give him the throne of his father David." Because, of course, he is from the tribe of Yehuda. This is why we inherit the throne of David. "And he shall reign over the house of Yaakov forever, and there shall be no end to his reign." Here is the conclusion of the matter. Yeshua, when he comes back, he will reunite Yehuda, which is today with Benjamin and the Levites, and the rest, the house of Israel, the 10 tribes. They will come together as one nation, according to Yehezkiel 37. And we are told here that Yeshua will reign over the house of Yaakov, not over the church, not over any denomination, Adventist and all what you want, Jehovah Witness and Mormons and all. No, he will reign over the house of Yaakov. And Yaakov is clear to know that he has 12 sons plus Manasseh and Ephraim. So I hope this message helped you to understand and to read Romans 11 in its context and not to make doctrines. So if you have questions, you can let it in comments. And thank you for today. Shalom. See you next time.